Picture this. You're on the ice. It's been a slow morning. Your buddy, 50 feet away, is using some old beat-up noodle rod he's had for a decade. And he's just pulling one crappie out after another. Meanwhile, you're holding your brand new $100 ultralight, super sensitive, high modulus graphite rod, and you haven't felt a single thing. Not a tap, not a tick, nothing. Sound familiar? What if I told you that expensive rod in your hand, the one marketed for its incredible sensitivity, is the very reason you're not feeling those bites? Today, we're going to expose a hard truth that the fishing industry doesn't talk about much. We're going to show you why your best ice rod might actually be a handicap. And I promise, by the end of this, you'll look at your gear in a whole new way. So let me ask you this right now, before we even start. Do you think a rod can be too sensitive? Let me know in the comments. For the last 20 years, the ice fishing world has been on a crusade for one thing: sensitivity. We've been taught that the key to catching more fish is feeling every subtle movement, every little thump down below. The marketing has been brilliant. We hear terms like high modulus graphite, fast action, and vibration transmission. We go to the store, we tap the rod tip, and we convince ourselves that this technology will make us better anglers. We spend more and more money on rods that promise to let us feel a fish breathing on our lure from 30 feet down. This has become the accepted wisdom, the gospel passed down from pro anglers and tackle companies. The problem is, this gospel is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how most fish actually bite in the dead of winter. We've been so obsessed with feeling the bite that we've completely forgotten how to see it. So let's start with the fundamental myth. The myth of the thump. We've all been conditioned, mostly from our open water fishing experience, to expect a bite to be a distinct tap, a pull, or a thump. And when we buy a sensitive graphite rod, that's what we are equipping ourselves to detect. These rods are engineering marvels designed to do one thing exceptionally well: transmit vibration from the lure, up the line, and into your hand. A fish aggressively strikes your lure, creating a sharp vibration, and that stiff, sensitive blank telegraphs it perfectly. You feel that satisfying tick, you set the hook, and the fish is on. It's a fantastic system that works beautifully when the fish cooperate by biting in that specific way. But here's the kicker. In the cold, clear water under the ice, that's often not how fish bite at all. They are far more subtle, and that's where our high-tech gear starts to fail us. To understand why, we need to think about fish behavior in winter. Most fish, especially panfish like crappie and bluegill, or even lethargic walleye, become much less aggressive when the water temperature plummets. Their metabolism slows down. They're not going to chase down a bait and slam it. Instead, they often approach it slowly, cautiously. A very common way they eat a small jig or lure is by simply inhaling it. They flare their gills, create a vacuum, and just suck the bait into their mouth. There is no aggressive strike. Often, after inhaling the bait, they will either sit perfectly still or, more commonly, rise up slightly in the water column. This isn't a thump, it's a lift. They are actually taking weight off of your line, not adding it. This is the single most common type of bite that anglers miss, day in and day out, on the ice. Now, let's look at your expensive graphite rod again. What is it really designed for? As we said, it's built to transmit vibration. It's stiff. That stiffness, or fast action, is what allows that tick to travel so efficiently. It's like tapping on a steel pipe versus a rubber hose. The steel pipe transmits the feeling instantly. That's your graphite rod. It's waiting for a signal, a percussive event, to tell you something is happening. It's an amazing tool for detecting a positive pressure change. When a fish pulls down, the rod excels. It sends that signal right to your fingertips, and you know it's time to act. It gives you a sense of connection and control, making you feel like you are in tune with everything happening below the ice. But this strength is also its greatest weakness. What happens when the bite isn't a pull, but a lift? Let's break down that lift bite, or as some call it, an up bite. Imagine your small tungsten jig hanging 20 feet below you. It has a certain weight. The fish approaches, sucks it in, and then moves up just a few inches. In that moment, the fish is now supporting the weight of the jig. What happens to your line? It goes slack. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible amount of slack is introduced into the system. There is no new vibration. There is no pull. There is no tick for your sensitive rod to transmit. In fact, the opposite happens. The connection, the tension that your rod was so good at monitoring, has been momentarily broken. As far as your hand is concerned, nothing happened. The fish has your bait in its mouth, and your $100 vibration detector is completely silent. It's lying to you through its silence. The problem with a stiff rod and a slack line is simple physics. You cannot push a rope. Similarly, a rod designed to transmit vibration through tension cannot tell you when that tension has been removed. It's like a silent alarm that only goes off when a door is opened, but does nothing when it's unlocked and left slightly ajar. The fish can hold that jig in its mouth for a few seconds, realize something isn't right, and spit it out before you ever even knew it was there. You're left sitting there, staring at your flasher, seeing the mark disappear, and wondering why they're not biting. The truth is, they are biting. You're just completely missing the signal because you brought the wrong tool, a tool that's deaf to the language these fish are speaking. It's one of the most frustrating experiences in all of ice fishing. Let's create a clear mental image of this upbite. Think of your rod tip. On a stiff graphite rod, it's probably barely bent, even with the lure on. There's just enough tension to keep the line straight. Now, a small perch comes up from below, sips in your jig, and rises 6 inches. Your line now has 6 inches of slack in it. What does your rod tip do? Absolutely nothing. It doesn't move. What does your hand feel? Absolutely nothing. The only clue you might have is a tiny little S curve in your line, right where it enters the water. But who's staring at their line that intensely for hours on end? The fish spits the hook. You continue to jig, completely oblivious. This exact scenario probably happens dozens, if not hundreds, of times to anglers every single day on the ice. They blame the weather, the fish, or their bait, but they never blame the rod. Now let's introduce a different concept, the load. This is where softer rods, like fiberglass or noodle rods, come into play. A noodle rod has an extremely soft, slow-action tip. When you hang even a tiny tungsten jig from it, that tip bends significantly. It loads up under the weight of the lure. This preloaded bend is the secret. It's a constant visual indicator of the tension in your system. You're not relying on your hand to feel a change. You're using your eyes to watch for a change in that bend. The rod tip becomes your bite indicator, and it's a far more sensitive and reliable indicator for subtle bites than the hand feel of a graphite rod could ever be. It's a completely different approach to bite detection, moving from a tactile sense to a visual one. So, how does this soft-loaded tip show you the upbite? Let's go back to our scenario. The noodle rod tip is bent over, loaded with the weight of that same tungsten jig. The perch swims up, inhales the bait, and rises those same 6 inches. The fish is now supporting the weight of the lure. What happens to your rod tip? Because it was preloaded and bent, it now instantly begins to straighten out. It rises up. It unloads. The change is not subtle. A rod tip that was bent down a few inches suddenly pops up. It's a clear, unmissable visual signal. You see the bite. You don't have to guess or wait for a tick. The rod tip's movement screams, "Hey, a fish just took your lure!" This is what your buddy with the old floppy rod was seeing. He wasn't feeling a thing. He was watching. This is the critical distinction: visual bite detection versus tactile bite detection. Your high-end graphite rod is a tool for tactile detection. It's for feeling. A noodle rod or a solid glass rod with a soft tip is a tool for visual detection. It's for seeing. On a tough winter day when fish are barely moving, the visual system is infinitely superior. It detects both the classic pull-down bites, where the tip bends even more, and the far more common lift bites, where the tip rises. A stiff graphite rod, by its very design, is only effective for one of those two bite types. You are essentially fishing with a handicap, ignoring 50% or more of the feedback the fish are giving you. It's like trying to watch a movie with your eyes closed, relying only on the sound. Let's use a real-world example that every ice angler can relate to: fishing for finicky crappie. Crappie are the undisputed masters of the upbite. They are notorious for suspending in the water column and delicately sipping in baits as they float by. I remember a day on the ice, sitting next to a veteran angler. I had my fancy sensitive rod, and he had a simple fiberglass rod. My flasher was lit up with marks, but I couldn't buy a bite. He, on the other hand, was methodically pulling fish after fish through the ice. I finally asked him what he was doing differently. He just pointed at his rod tip and said, "I'm not waiting to feel them, son. I'm watching for them to lift." That one sentence completely changed my understanding of ice fishing. He was watching his rod tip pop up ever so slightly, and that was his cue to set the hook. Now, let's revisit what my stiff graphite rod was doing in that crappie fishing scenario. The rod tip had almost no bend in it. When a crappie would swim up and inhale my jig, the line would go slack, but the rod tip, being so stiff, didn't have any preload to release. So, it didn't move at all. It just sat there, motionless. The tiny bit of slack in the line was impossible to see, and because there was no tension, my hand felt absolutely nothing. The fish had the lure, and my expensive gear was giving me zero information. It was a complete failure of the system. I was waiting for a tick from a fish that was giving a lift. It was a classic case of using a screwdriver when I needed a hammer. The tool was high quality, but it was fundamentally the wrong tool for the job that day. Some of you might be thinking, well, that's what a spring bobber is for. And you are absolutely correct. A spring bobber is a fantastic tool that solves this exact problem. It's a hypersensitive visual indicator that you add to the end of your rod. It loads up under the weight of the lure and will show you both pull-down and lift bites. But think about what that really means. A spring bobber is an accessory that you have to buy and add to your expensive, sensitive rod to make it actually sensitive to all bite types. You are putting a patch on your gear to fix a problem that the gear itself created. You're adding a visual indicator to a rod that was supposed to be all about feel. It's an admission that the stiff graphite blank, on its own, is insufficient for the task at hand. So, what is the more elegant solution? It's a rod that has the spring bobber built right in. That's essentially what a noodle rod or an ultralight solid glass rod is. The entire tip section of the rod acts as one big, perfectly integrated spring bobber. There's nothing to get tangled, nothing to freeze up, and the transition from the soft tip to the stronger backbone of the rod is seamless. You get the ultimate in visual bite detection from the tip, but you still have the power in the rest of the blank to fight the fish. These rods aren't a gimmick. They are a purpose-built tool designed specifically for the visual detection of light bites. In many cases, they are also significantly cheaper than their high-modulus graphite counterparts, which is just an added bonus. Now, let's debunk a common myth about these softer rods: the perceived lack of hook setting power. People see that soft, floppy tip and think, there's no way I can get a good hook set with that thing. This is a misunderstanding of how a fishing rod works. The extreme fast-action tip is only the first few inches of the rod. Its job is solely bite detection. The power, or the backbone of the rod, is in the middle and lower sections of the blank. When you set the hook, that soft tip folds away instantly, and you are engaging the powerful backbone of the rod. It's the best of both worlds. You get the finesse and sensitivity of the tip, and the raw power of the main blank. You don't sacrifice power, you just gain a far superior bite detection system. The best way to think of it is to separate the rod into two distinct parts. The top third, the soft section, is your indicator. Its only job is to show you what is happening with your lure. Is it being pulled down? Is it being lifted up? That's all that section does. The bottom two-thirds of the rod is your engine. That's the part with all the power for setting the hook and fighting the fish. A well-designed noodle rod has a perfect transition between these two zones. A graphite rod, on the other hand, tries to make the entire rod a single-purpose tool for transmitting vibration, and in doing so, it sacrifices the visual indication that is so incredibly critical for winter fishing. It's a one-trick pony in a sport that often requires a more versatile approach. Let's paint one final picture to really drive this home. You're out on the ice, and this time you have a noodle rod. You're jigging a small spoon for perch. You stop your jigging cadence and hold the rod perfectly still. Your eyes are glued to the tip, which is bent down in a gentle arc from the weight of the spoon. You watch it, completely focused. Suddenly, you see the tip twitch upward, not down, but up, just a fraction of an inch. It's a signal so subtle you never would have felt it. But you saw it. You sweep the rod up, engaging the powerful backbone, and feel the solid weight of a nice jumbo perch. That is the bite you were missing before. That is the power of visual detection. That is the fish your sensitive rod was lying to you about. When you were using your sensitive graphite rod in that exact same situation, you would have been waiting for the tick. You would have been focused on your sense of touch. The perch comes in, lifts the spoon, and you feel absolutely nothing. Maybe you think it was just the current, or you bumped a weed. You don't set the hook. The perch holds the spoon for a second, feels the hard metal, and spits it out. You missed your chance. You were tuned into the wrong frequency. The fish was broadcasting on the visual channel, and you were listening on the tactile channel. This is the simple, frustrating truth that explains so many slow days on the ice for so many anglers. They have the right bait, the right location, but the wrong detection system. Now, am I saying you should go home and throw away all of your expensive graphite rods? Absolutely not. That's not the point. Those rods have a definite and important place in ice fishing. They are the perfect tool for specific applications. If you are power fishing for lake trout with heavy tube jigs, you want that stiffness and feel. If you are aggressively ripping a lipless crankbait for walleye, that graphite rod is your best friend. The key is understanding that it is a specialized tool, not a one-size-fits-all solution. The mistake we've all been making is believing the marketing hype that this one type of sensitive rod is the ultimate weapon for every situation. It simply isn't true. It's about using the right tool for the right job. A stiff rod is excellent when you expect a reaction strike. It's for when a fish is going to chase and hammer your bait. It's for when you are imparting a lot of action into a heavier lure. In those scenarios, the bite is almost always a positive downward pull, and the graphite rod will tell you about it with authority. But for the vast majority of ice fishing situations, especially when targeting panfish or neutral mood predators with small baits, the bite is subtle, and very often it's a lift. For those situations, a rod designed for visual detection, like a noodle or solid glass rod, is not just a good option. It is, without a doubt, the superior tool. Having both types of rods in your arsenal is what makes you a truly versatile and effective ice angler. So the ultimate takeaway here is a simple but profound shift in thinking. For years, we've been told to feel the bite. I'm telling you to start seeing the bite. Stop relying exclusively on what your hand is telling you, and start paying intense attention to what your rod tip is showing you. This means choosing a rod with a tip soft enough to load under the weight of your lure. It means training your eyes to spot that subtle upward pop, that moment when the tip unloads. This is the secret language of winter fish, and once you learn to see it, a whole new world of bite detection will open up to you. I guarantee that if you make this one change, if you switch to a visual detection system on those tough days, your catch rate will not just improve, it will skyrocket. So, the big reveal, the twist in all of this, is that the industry's obsession with sensitivity has been a bit of a misdirection. We've been chasing the wrong thing. That expensive, ultra-sensitive rod isn't a liar because it's a bad product. It's not. It's a liar because it can only tell you half of the story. It tells you about the pulls, but it stays completely silent about the lifts. And those lifts are where most of the action is on a tough day. The most mind-blowing moment for any ice angler is the first time they see their noodle rod tip pop up, and they set the hook into a fish they know, for a fact, they never would have felt. That's the aha moment. It fundamentally proves that for years, fish have been eating and spitting out our lures right under our noses, and our best gear was letting it happen. This isn't just a tip, it's a paradigm shift. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge some old-school thinking with me. If this video gave you something to think about, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that cuts through the noise. And now, I want to ask you a serious question for the comments. After hearing all this, are you willing to put down your favorite graphite rod and give a noodle rod an honest try on your next trip? Let me know your thoughts below. We'll see you on the next one.